I never expected to become a vigilante armed with gummy worms, but after spending nearly half a movie dealing with the most annoying theatre guests I'd ever encountered, I finally reached my breaking point. A few years ago, I went to see Inside Out 2 in theatres. I was excited, grabbed my snacks, found my seat, and settled in for what I hoped would be a relaxing movie night. Unfortunately, sitting directly in front of me were two women and a young girl who looked about 7 or 8 years old. At first, they seemed harmless. Then the movie started. Within minutes, the two women began talking. Not occasional whispers, but actual conversations. Every emotional scene, every funny moment, every important part of the movie seemed to trigger another discussion. As if that wasn't bad enough, one of the women kept pulling out her phone, and not just for a quick glance. She had the brightness turned all the way up. Every few minutes, the entire row would light up like someone had switched on a flashlight in the middle of the theatre. It was so bright that I could practically see what she was doing from several seats away. I tried to ignore it. I really did. I told myself they would stop eventually. But they didn't. The talking continued. The phone kept appearing. Other people around us were clearly annoyed too, but nobody wanted to be the person who started a confrontation in the middle of a family movie. The frustration kept building. Then I remembered something. Sitting in my pocket was an unopened pack of gummy worms. At first the idea seemed ridiculous. But the longer I watched that glowing phone screen, the more reasonable it started to sound. I pulled out the pack and stared at it for a moment. Suddenly, those gummy worms weren't candy anymore. They were ammunition. I carefully opened the pack and selected a single worm. No way was I wasting an entire gummy worm on this mission. I bit it in half and held the remaining piece between my fingers. Then I looked at the phone, looked at the gummy worm, looked back at the phone. A plan had officially formed. When the woman once again pulled out her phone and lit up half the theatre, I took aim. I waited for the perfect moment, then launched the gummy worm fragment through the darkness. To my surprise, it was a direct hit. She immediately spun around and looked behind her with a confused expression. Meanwhile, I became deeply fascinated by the movie screen, acting as if I hadn't moved a muscle. After a few seconds, she turned back around. For one glorious minute, the phone disappeared. I thought the mission had succeeded. Then the screen returned, brighter than ever. Apparently, she had learned absolutely nothing. That meant it was time for round 2. A few minutes later, I repeated the process. Another gummy worm, another bite, another carefully aimed launch. Once again, the gummy worm found its target. This time, however, the woman was furious. She whipped around in her seat and stared directly at me. "Stop it," she snapped. I didn't react. I kept my eyes glued to the screen as though I had no idea what she was talking about. Then she turned to the other woman and the little girl. "He's throwing gummy worms at me," she said angrily. All three of them turned around and began scanning the theatre for suspects. My heart started racing. I was convinced the operation had just been exposed. Then the little girl pointed in my direction. For a split second, I thought it was over. I thought she had identified me. But then she said something that nearly made me laugh out loud. Well, it definitely wasn't that guy. I couldn't believe it. Somehow I had just received the strongest alibi in the entire theatre from the one witness who should have caught me. The women continued whispering to each other for a few moments, clearly trying to solve the mystery. Eventually they turned back toward the screen, and that's when something amazing happened. The phone brightness dropped dramatically. A little while later, the phone disappeared altogether. Even better, the talking stopped. Completely. For the rest of the movie, the theatre was peaceful. No glowing screen. No conversations. No distractions. At one point, the woman even left the theatre for a few minutes, which made me suspect she had gone to complain to the staff. But if she did, nothing came of it. After all, how do you explain that you've been attacked by mysterious airborne gummy worms without sounding completely ridiculous? By the time the credits rolled, I had achieved something I never thought possible. I had restored peace to an entire theatre using nothing more than half-eaten candy and absolute denial. Somewhere in that theatre sat a confused woman who had been defeated by a gummy worm sniper she could never identify. If you enjoyed this petty revenge story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more hilarious revenge stories, entitled People Getting Instant Karma and Unforgettable Real-Life Encounters. And tell me in the comments, what's the worst thing you've ever experienced in a movie theatre?